It's a privilege to be here, and even more of an honor to be here with two GSB alums, partners of mine. And I want to offer you some career advice and tell you the story of Kleiner Perkins. And be sure that Trey Vassallo, to your left, my partner since 2000 and a GSB grad, can share with you her perspective on innovation, entrepreneurs, and venture capital. And also Chi-Hwa Chen, a grad of 2006. Is that right? And I'll have more to say about both of them in just a second. Do you have the clicker?
Yep.
I prepared 14 slides, and my goal for this time is to spend over half of it in Q&A, in interaction with you. So as we go along, pull out your notebook, write down questions. We're going to try to cover as many of those as we can collectively. My aim in the first part of our conversation is to tell you a little bit about Kleiner Perkins, our business, our strategy, to tell you a little bit about what's going on in two of the three initiatives that we think are really important, go into green technologies and digital technologies, and then to offer you some unsolicited career advice as you're thinking about where you're going with your career and perhaps even your life. That's worth what you're going to pay for it, which is nothing. and then we'll dive right into questions and answers, and I hope that'll do well. We will end on time in an hour. So the Kleiner Perkins partnership is a service business. We're in a service industry. Our business doesn't scale very well. Our job is to help entrepreneurs. And the way we've figured out to best do that is to build our team of partners with people who've had significant entrepreneurial experience. So Trey was an early founder of the company that today is really the core of Palm computing. She designed the Palm 5, which is the iconic PDA. Chi-Hwa, he worked at a very hot advertising networking company, built ad networks, and then we ripped him out of Excel Partners to come take on a lot more responsibility here at Kleiner. That ability to connect with and serve entrepreneurs is key to being good in the venture capital business, and we've done a good job. We've got a couple hundred years of investing experience in our partnership. We view ourselves more as company builders than financiers. I ran more discounted cash flow statements at Intel than I ever have done since I've come to Kleiner. And the heart, I think, of what we have to offer is our team. This is 16 of our investing professionals. That's the whole team working on digital technologies and green technologies. We have some other partners who are at work in the life sciences. And of course, you'll see Trey and you'll see Chi-Hwa there. Kleiner has always had a strategy of being a multi-generational partnership, so that at any time there's 3 generations of partners in our firm. A venture capital firm could be an episodic collection of talented individuals. And fortunately, when I joined in 1980 as an untalented individual, Tom Perkins, who had built Hewlett-Packard, said, we want to build a service organization that can last beyond any of the partners. Is there anybody I should point out here? Trey and Chi-Hwa, that's Al Gore stands out, I guess. A lot of venture firms have people that are door openers and their names on the nameplate and so forth. Al is not that. He's an amazing leader and human being. I mean, we came so close, within 400 votes in Florida, of having him be President of the United States, or 1 vote in the Supreme Court. We'd be in a much better world today if that were the case. But Al is a nerd. He's a techie. He's on email. He responds all the time. Anytime he's in the Bay Area, which is often, several times a month, he comes to the offices, he comes to the partner meetings, he comes to the strategy offsites, and he gives us great investing insights. I hope in your work in these fields that you'll get to know Al Gore. Thank you. That's the track record. Those are the results. A lot of jobs, a lot of investments, a lot of IPOs, and a lot of market value. We work for the Stanford Endowment and other university endowments. So they give us part of the endowment. Our job is to return to them 10 times more what they give us. And we've done that pretty successfully. Over about a decade, we distributed $1 billion of profits a year to our limited partners on average. It's been tougher now for public offerings and for distributions and returns, but that just means we got to work harder and the entrepreneurs have got to be more successful. Our strategy is to focus on building companies and helping the entrepreneurs of the world build companies. That can take many different forms. In the case of Google, it took the form of helping them get a great CEO and then work on their strategies. In the case of some of the companies that Chi is working on, it takes the form of forging strategic relationships and going after the right markets. If you do all that well, the one final ingredient that makes for a really great company is the culture of the company. What are their values? And because I believe that you'll, in the next year or two, be looking at where you launch your career, I want to share with you an observation that Randy Komisar made about companies and their values. And he said, you know, there's two really different strains, if you want to paint the extreme, in Silicon Valley companies. And either one can succeed. In fact, we see both of them succeeding. But I think if you go into your first assignment, when you're interviewing, have this in mind, it I think can help you make better choices about what works for you. And I refer to these strains as the mercenaries and the missionaries. The mercenaries and the missionaries, right? In a mercenary culture, there's tremendous drive. And in fact, Andy Grove even said, only the paranoid survive. In a missionary culture, by contrast, there's passion. Drive and passion. Think about the difference of those two. In the mercenary culture, I like to say that the entrepreneurs, the executives, are opportunistic. The missionaries are more strategic. The mercenaries focus on the pitch, on the deal, and they're sprinting for the short run, as opposed to the missionaries who are paying attention to the big idea and understand it's a marathon. In a mercenary culture, you obsess on the competition, and you may develop an aristocracy of the founders. The missionaries, by contrast, focus on the customers, and they build a kind of cultural meritocracy where the best ideas can win. Those mercenary cultures tend to focus on financial statements, and the way they develop the people is kind of loners, kind of you're on your own. In the missionary culture, you'll hear a lot more about value statements, and people really try to practice those and live those. Those are companies that are infused with coaches, and they understand that it takes teams to win. In the mercenary culture, you're entitled to that additional bonus from your large enterprise software company, as opposed to you've made a contribution and now you'll be rewarded for it. It's the difference between what I like to call the deferred life plan or the whole life that really works. Anybody who tells you they're not interested in making money, I think, is not telling you the truth. It's the difference between a lust for making money, or yes, making money and also meaning. I like to characterize it as the difference between striving for success or success and significance. I want to emphasize again, either of these two cultures can work. I know there's one that I prefer to be involved in, which is that missionary culture. But it's something to think about, I believe, as you look for where you're going to invest the very important and precious next years of your lives. Historically, Kleiner Perkins has been in two businesses, the information technologies and the life sciences technologies, or as I like to call it, the bits and bytes and the bugs and drugs. And one of the third legs that we added to the stool, it's a big strategic move for us in the last 5 years, is to spend time with the green technologies, the energy technologies, the biofuels and the batteries, the solar cells, the wind, and it's quite a diverse industry. It's been fun to learn about that industry and to try to rise to meet the challenges that we see. The main thing I want to say in orienting you about the green or the energy industry is it's an enormous industry. And if you want to learn about it, I encourage you to start with this slide and then get Al Gore's latest book. This slide shows the energy flows for the U.S. economy. The sources are on the left, the uses are on your right. For someone who's interested in green, as I am, it's notable that renewable resources account for less than 6% of our energy sources. Among those, wind is the largest. Through this diagram flows about, I guess about $500 billion a year of purchases of oil from places that are not particularly friendly to us. The petroleum expenditures. And another notable thing is through these energy flows, almost half of the U.S. energy is wasted. in the form of heat or inefficient engines or transmission lines. So there's tremendous opportunities to improve this energy system, lower its cost, and have it be renewable. It's a very large market. We've been working in it actually 7 years, though we didn't know that when we started. It's been 5 years that we've been knowingly making investments in the field. We've invested in a little over 50 companies and $600 million perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
I think it's about right now.
A lot more to come.
Yeah, and more to come. We're very excited about those opportunities. For those of you who care about leadership in the U.S. and economic leadership, the contrast between green and digital or the internet is pretty profound. What do Microsoft and Apple and Google and Netscape and VeriSign and eBay and Amazon all have in common? All those companies are leaders in the internet industry worldwide, and they're all American. If you look at where America stands today in the green technologies and just pick the top 30 companies, 10 each, in wind, in solar, and in advanced batteries, of those 30, only 4 are American. Only 4. So we are almost not in this race. One of the top 10 battery companies, one of the top 10 wind companies, and 2 of the top solar companies. That should give us pause. The reason for that is we haven't had the right policies to develop local markets. We haven't had the right level of investment in R&D. And so these are things that we all, as citizens and people who care about innovation and economic leadership in our country, ought to be calling for, writing op-eds about, talking to our senators and political leaders. If we do that, and if we get it right, we can ensure that our country is a worldwide leader in this next great global industry. And if we don't, we're going to be buying our wind turbines from China, borrowing money from China to buy oil in the Middle East and then to burn it in the middle of our country. So there's a lot at stake, and I think the next 5 to 10 years are very critical. But policy is not the business at Kleiner Perkins. It's innovation and backing entrepreneurs to build great new things. And so I'd like Trey to give us an overview of all the areas in which we're making green investments. And then I'm going to ask Chi Hua to do the same thing for our digital portfolio.
Thanks, John. So as you can see, we've actually been incredibly busy over the last 7 years. As John indicated, we have over 50 companies that we would now classify as green tech investments at KP. One thing that I think differentiates how we invest from some other venture firms in this area is that we haven't gone after simply the companies that look like information technology companies as applied to green, but we've really looked at the whole spectrum. Everything from supply side, those are the big renewables, to efficiency companies, to transportation. And so I'm going to highlight a few of the companies in our portfolio, and please, if you have any specific questions about any one of these companies, we're going to have a big Q&A session, and feel free to ask us some more detail then. As John pointed out, we're less than 6% of all of our energy comes from renewables. So we saw a huge opportunity to ramp that up, and we also saw a lot of entrepreneurs who are coming to us with really deep fundamental innovations in this area. As you can see, we have a lot of stealth solar companies. A lot of times in our early technology companies, we don't like to be very explicit about what technology we're developing, but we have several companies that are focused on next generation, high efficiency, lower cost solar. We have large scale solar through solar thermal companies. We're investing in geothermal. We're investing in fuel cells. So we have a very nice portfolio on the supply side that is really atypical for venture, but again, like we said, it's a really big leverage point for our energy economy going forward. We've also spent a lot of time in renewable fuels, and you can see that we have quite a few fuels portfolios. Now, this is a sector that's gotten a lot of negative press lately for people who've gone after corn ethanol and basically taking food and trying to convert it to fuel. We've stayed away from that for the most part and are really focused on the garbage part of the rather than taking the fruits, we're taking the parts that would otherwise be burnt or destroyed, or people haven't been able to convert into other useful things. So we have looked at every possible way, chemical processes, physical processes, to convert that cellulose not only into fuels, but also into useful chemical precursors. So we see a lot of exciting innovation and activity going on in this area, despite what you may be hearing from the market and the press. Energy efficiency is really a catch-all for a lot of technologies that are on what we call the demand side of the market. It's how you use the energy. And this is really about smarter energy usage, making processes that are less energy intensive. And so this is a broad range of companies. But there's one company in here I'd like to point out, because it's part of a whole ecosystem of companies that we're all hearing a lot more about these days, and that's called the smart grid. And if you look around and you look at all the networks that exist around us, the electric grid is one of the dumbest there is out there. It was invented 100 years ago and really has not been updated since. And the best way to describe Silver Spring is it's really overlaying the internet on top of the electric grid. You may have heard this, but if the electricity goes out at your house, right now the only way that the utility company knows about it is if you call them up and tell them. It's a really, truly dumb grid. And technology like Silver Spring, what that means by laying the internet over the top of it, you're essentially creating two-way communication points between all the nodes on the grid. So now you start to enable whole sets of ecosystems of technologies that no one has ever been able to think about before. We're at the very, very early stages of that, and our portfolio company Silver Spring is one of the big leaders in this area. And PG&E is one of their big partners, and you may have heard, but we just recently rolled out the 1 millionth node on the Silver Spring network in the Bay Area. So there's actually some incredibly exciting stuff going on in the smart grid. The last area that I want to point out today in our green portfolio is really transportation and storage. A lot of people talk about batteries being a key innovation piece for not only renewables performing better, but for transportation. Batteries are incredibly important. So this is an area where we have several stealth companies that are innovating on new chemistries, better efficiencies, that we think over time will be able to make electric vehicles, renewables on the grid far more usable because we have appropriate and cost-effective storage techniques. The last company I just wanted to highlight is one that I spend a lot of time on and know well, is in the transportation sector, and that's Fisker. You may have heard a little bit about what they're doing, but the timing of investing in a company like that is actually pretty extraordinary right now. If you think about the automotive industry, it's existed since the late 1800s, not a ton of innovation. And so for the first time, you've got this whole electrification of the drivetrain, big technology shift happening. And if you look at other industries, historically those major technology shifts don't normally come from the big incumbents. So we've got this opportunity for new companies who are focused on this new technology to come in, and meanwhile the big companies are fighting with insolvency and lots of other just macroeconomic issues. So it really is an extraordinary time to be investing in the electrification of the drivetrain. That's exactly what we're doing with a company like Fisker. And so that's a quick snapshot, and with that I'll hand it back over to John.
That's excellent. Thanks very much, Trey. You might get the sense that all Kleiner is doing is green, and the truth of the matter is that our efforts in digital investing are just as big and have been longer lived than the work that we're doing in green. I'm going to fly through a similar overview of the areas in which we're investing, and then we're going to dive right into the iPhone and the iFund. For the longest time, consumer-facing businesses have been explosive in terms of their growth, and we continue to, I believe, be a leader in that field. The most exciting of all these investments is a company called Zynga. Has anybody in this room played Farmville or Cafe-ville or those games? Scramble, Texas Hold'em, where there's 70 million people who are playing Zynga games every month, which is just a remarkably large population. And I think they found the way to monetize, to get value out of the social networks, and that's by allowing people to buy virtual goods. It's quite a rapidly growing company. In fact, the fastest I've ever seen. We're going to come to the iFund in just a moment. We're seeing a real resurgence of interest and innovation in the semiconductor fields, in the science of the small, innovative new storage, new MEMS kinds of devices. And then for quite a while, we've been investing in digital infrastructure and innovations there. It was June 27th of 2007, right, when Apple shipped the first iPhones. I think I've got that right. And we were blown away at Kleiner. Bill Joy had been forecasting that this kind of a device, which could be in your pocket, know who you are, where you are, be broadband, always connected, was an enormous new platform. So out of strategic work that Chi Hua and Matt Murphy and Trey and I had done, we said, this is going to be the next big thing. We want to go do a deal with Apple and partner with them to encourage the development of those applications. And we did, and we announced that in March of last year. And Chi Hua named the iPhone, dealt with the 3,000 or more plans that came in. And so I'd like him to give you a quick but really privileged glimpse into what's going on with the development of applications for these new mobile devices.
Great, thanks, John. So why did we launch the iPhone? We saw several trends evolving simultaneously that got us really excited. First of all, wireless broadband everywhere, directly into your pocket. Secondly, a company like Apple that had a real consumer brand and was expert at developing great consumer products coming into this market that had historically been done by handset OEMs that didn't have good consumer experiences. A piece of hardware, the iPhone, that was fundamentally a computing device first and a phone second. App Store, which sits on 150 million desktops via iTunes and can deliver new forms of software directly to consumers with no intermediaries. And finally, a software development kit that would enable people, developers, many of them who are in small 2-, 3-person companies, to develop desktop-like software that had historically been impossible on mobile devices. So what we had was a computing device in your pocket that was broadband connected. It was personal, it was social, it was context aware, and it could enable an entirely new class of applications. And this gives you a sense of what that really means. So to put it in raw terms, how many of you guys own an iPod? Okay, that's
Wow.
a lot of people. So the iPhone is outselling the iPod over its 2.5-year launch period by a factor of 12. 12 times as many iPhones have been sold as iPods, and you saw how many people own iPods in its 2.5-year launch period. How many of you guys have downloaded a song on iTunes? Okay. The App Store is outselling iTunes over its 2-year launch period by 20 times. 2 billion applications have been downloaded on the App Store in its first 8 quarters, and that same period of time in iTunes history only had 100 million songs downloaded. Putting it in more simple terms for something that you guys, or analogies that you guys would be familiar with, Mary Maker put this slide together recently, and it showed what's happening with the iPhone, which is on the far left. iPhone and iPod Touch is a consistent platform, compared to things we know, like Netscape, 5 times as large as Netscape. AOL, 8 times as large as AOL. N-Mode in Japan, which was previously the most successful mobile platform, twice as big as M-Mode 9 quarters after launch. So what does that mean for us? It suggests that there's an entirely new class of applications. We've invested in 9 companies so far, and we're going after super verticals in those that area of mobile. Going after advertising, commerce, real-time content creation, communication, and location-based services. We think that there will be a significant revolution in the way that people access information, which is what this is really about, when it becomes mobilized and it becomes real-time, and we're looking to invest in many more companies in that area.
Let's wrap up by me making these unsolicited career observations for you. And I realize that some of you are in various phases of your career, so you can tune out anything that doesn't feel right to you. I think as you're making the important choice about what you're going to do when you leave the graduate school, I'd prioritize learning. And pick your next assignment based on your ability to learn and grow, not so much on your level of compensation. Now, if you're among the rare Stanford grads or almost grads who drop out the way Larry and Sergey did, I want you to come see us right after this conversation. But I think for the vast majority of us, certainly for me, I wanted to go work in a place I'd learn a lot, which turned out at that moment in time to be Intel. I think developing a strong foundation of experiences and commercial experiences, not just finance, not just control, but selling, building a business, carrying a bag, launching a product, managing people is a really important skill to develop. I think you should try to learn really good management and leadership processes from some of the best companies, because there are some really great people to learn from in the Amazons. Yes, the Intels to this day, the Intuits, the Googles, even the GEs. There will come a time, I think, in your career where you're going to break that path and you're going to go off and really swing for the stands and own or build your own business or build one with others. That's not true for all of us, but for many of us. What I want to suggest to you is you'll know when that time is right. You don't need to do it right out of the business school, and indeed you can learn a lot from others on their ticket and on their own money. Whatever path you take, I believe you're going to be judged on the following: your ability to listen actively, think critically, and above everything else to communicate. I think you're judged by your ability to speak on your feet, to debate the merits of issues, and that's whether you're in a large group or in a small group. And it's for a very fundamental reason. We believe ideas are easy, execution is everything, and in anything worth doing, it takes a team to win. Ideas are easy, execution's everything, it takes a team to win. The way you as leaders are going to inspire teams is by your ability to think and speak on your feet and rally others to go after that cause, that set of priorities, that business objective. One thing Andy Grove taught at Intel was how important it is to be able to confront a problem without confronting a person. So Chiwa, it's not because you're a jerk, because you're not, you know? It's this problem that we have with the backlog of iFund applications that are coming in. We got to figure out a way to solve that business problem together. And so that skill, which I don't possess well enough, of confronting a problem without confronting the person is an essential one in leading groups. So I want to really encourage you to not forego opportunities to learn how to recruit, to sell, to hire and fire, to inspire, to manage, to develop and motivate people with tough love. Because whatever field you work in, I think it's a very fundamental skill. And then finally, there's always extra points for humor. I sure wish I had a better sense of humor and was something of a stand-up comic. I think, quite to the contrary, the results of what I do are what's kind of humorous. Extra points for humor. It's a very powerful social and business weapon. You're in the networking business right here and now, and you are in the best place in the world to network. This is so much better than any other place in the world. And so I encourage you to always network, develop and sustain personal and lifelong networks. And I don't mean the Facebook kinds of networks. I mean face-to-face personal ones. Find a way when you're networking to, at every point in your life, sustain a mentorship relationship with somebody. Find someone you admire and say, will you mentor me? There's nothing in it for them other than the satisfaction of helping you, but you in turn can mentor someone else along your way. Network like crazy. Look for positions where there's a lot of external contacts, marketing, sales, business development, developer relations. Be prepared to take risks. To ask permission is to seek denial. But all along the way, please remember that integrity is a binary state. Your integrity is like sand you hold in your hands. And if you ever spread your fingers apart and you let that sand fall through it, it's gone forever. Integrity is a binary state. Either you have it or you don't.
John, can I interrupt and add one other bit of unsolicited advice?
Please. Stand up.
So if it's not obvious, I am pregnant, but I just wanted to say, you can have a career and you can have a family, because I've seen a lot of my GSB classmates drop out of the workforce as life goes on. And I just think that it's important to know that it's not easy, but it can be done. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. And there never is a good time. So I had my first kid when I was launching a product in a startup that I founded. John was on our board. It was crazy. It works out. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah. Don't put off having a family too late. But that's a personal choice. Do you have anything to interrupt me about?
No.
No, not at the moment. So this gig, what we're trying to do, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. One of the things I've done past times I've been here is I've told you about some of my favorite books. I'll tell you what, if you send me an email with your 3 favorite books, I will send you this list. And of these, my favorite at the moment is called Our Choice. It's Al Gore's blockbuster book about the solutions to climate crisis, not the problems. So if you want to work at a startup, or if you've got a business plan you'd like to get funded, or you'd like to work with us on a 380 project, at least they were called that, please email me or Chiwa or Trey at the addresses you see there. And on that note, I think we're going to move into the Q&A part of our conversation. And I'd like to get as many questions answered as we possibly can. This is your time. So what we're going to do is take the questions at, you can turn off the projector now, please. About 3 at a time. We're going to throw them up on the board, get as many on the board as we can, and then try to answer them. So here's the way to handle a question. If you'll put your hand up in your name, then I'm going to write the question on the board. And the questions are all in one deep breath, and they end with a question mark. Yes. You guys stay here. Go ahead. Name?
Brendan.
Brendan.
Question.
Yeah, questions are fine. Let's go.
Is it enough? Are we doing enough? That was the speech you gave a while back.
Oh, it's going to be enough, right.
Is it going to be enough?
For those of you who didn't see it, are we going to avoid catastrophic, irreversible climate crisis? Okay.
Second question, and of the diversity you have in the partnership as well as the people you invest in, do you see a consistent trait on the partner side, and do you see a consistent trait on the entrepreneur side?
Okay, what are the traits that we see among the partners? Let's go with another question, please. Entrepreneurs. Yes? Who's got a question? Oh, yes, ma'am. Name?
Hi, I'm Natalie. I was wondering, I saw that most of the power generation companies in clean tech are solar. What do you think about the other clean tech technologies that are out there at the moment?
Power gen other than solar. Okay, great question. How about another one?
Do you have me speak to Android?
Sure.
Okay, that was a question about Android. Keep going. Trey, do you want to field the question? Yeah.
Hi, Pablo. What's the one piece of advice you'd give someone starting a company today?
Okay, start company advice.
Mike, what are the traits that you see that are successful among the entrepreneurs that have really hit it big?
Winning traits.
Interest. What's your view of the e-reader space?
Okay, e-readers.
Mainstream media, journalism in trouble. Where do you stand on the pay for content?
Pay for content. Great question.
Talk a little bit more about the culture.
Name?
Caitlin Thornton.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about the culture within your company and how decisions are made.
Okay. This is the venture capital grid, KP culture.
Go ahead.
My name's Amal. I'm wondering, what's your thought on how important it is to be in Silicon Valley for digital IT startups?
Okay.
My name is Juan Pablo Mas, and I wanted to ask why the life sciences third leg of your stool didn't make the list today, and what it would take in the industry for it to make your next presentation.
My name is Matt. What's your best tactical advice for balancing work and family?
Okay, we're going to put the life questions over here. And I love those questions. Yeah. Keep going.
Pooja, raising money while at school.
Raising money at
While
school.
at school.
For a
Sorry.
charity, for a company?
Sorry.
For your tuition? Yeah. All right, that's a venture capital related question.
JJ, social impact investing entrepreneurship.
Social entrepreneurs?
Yeah, investing.
Okay.
Sam Edelson. First, do you worry about the capital intensity of the clean tech business? And second, what do you see as the monetization model for iPhone apps?
All right, so the answer to the first question is yes.
How do you address that? And
How dollars for green tech?
So I'd love to hear your thoughts on venture capital and emerging markets.
Okay. You want to get two more, Trey, maybe?
Name's Abhishek. Wondering, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made and how'd you overcome it?
Okay, that's a life mistake.
My name's Kevin Ettrick. I was curious about trends in the venture capital space and what Kleiner Perkins is doing in response to them.
Okay, so this is great. You know, in about 5 minutes, we threw up there 15 questions. I'm really impressed by our efficiency. And we'll take 10 minutes to answer 15 questions. We won't get them all. And that might even give us some time for some follow-up ones. And I think I'll just take them in the order that we put here on the board. I gave a talk at TED where I got choked up at the end, saying that the engineer in me didn't think we were going to be able to avert catastrophic climate crisis, fundamentally because of the speed and scale at which we must act to solve these problems. And I think now we will have enough innovation to solve the part of the problem that is in the 10 to 20-year time horizon. But if that's all we do, we will not avert catastrophic climate crisis. So most importantly, we've got to get some key policies right now. In fact, we've got to get them right before we go in the midterm elections. And if we don't put a price on carbon, a price and a cap on carbon, I think by the end of the next set of elections, the United States will not have the political power to do it. If the United States doesn't lead, the world's not going to follow, and we could be set back 5 or 10 years in the most important leg of this. So I'm not sure it's enough yet. Stay tuned. It really matters. Power generation other than solar. We're very long on solar, more so than any other venture capital fund, I believe. But we also think there are equally exciting ways to generate electricity. And I would say solar thermal is one of those. There is wind as a way to generate electricity. We think we found a breakthrough in wind. And what other?
Is one that I've spent a lot of time on. In fact, that's one where we read an early study that said, you know, it's a sector where you've got a base load renewable. The base load means it's producing energy all the time, regardless of whether the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, and that it was underfunded, but that over the next 25 years, we could have 100,000 megawatts of produced geothermal if we invested in it. So we sought out the best team, and we actually did seed fund a firm right now that just received a $26 million grant from the DOE and is doing some of the most innovative work in geothermal.
They got it? I didn't know they got that grant.
Yeah, they did.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So,
Trey has incubated this company, and it's really spectacular work by her. And I want to say again in the form of career advice, Trey could not have done that if she were not an entrepreneur before she came to Kleiner, and she didn't have that operating experience. So that's a great career role model. How are we going to get the money that we need for green tech? Well, charity begins at home. So the first thing that we did is we raised a $1 billion focused green tech fund, biggest funds Kleiner's ever raised, in addition to devoting about 40% of our ordinary startup venture capital dollars to it. But that's not enough. We took a look at how much capital our current green ventures are going to need, the 50 or so ventures. It's another $4.5 billion. So we actively syndicate those investments with other venture investors. And God bless the Obama administration and the US government, because we have really got the A team now working on green innovation in our country. And many of these companies have applied for, some have made it, some have not, loan guarantees from the Department of Energy. I think we're going to be able to fund these companies, but I'm hoping for, in fact, I'm expecting a really robust market for public offerings in green starting next year. The next set of questions had to do with venture capital firms, and someone astutely noted that if you look at the photos of the Kleiner partners, there's a great deal of diversity in our partnership, and you're not going to find that in any other venture capital partnership, I assure you. Most VCs are a half dozen to a dozen white male wonder bread, MBAs, frankly. Some of whom have operating experience, some of whom do not. And our experience in building companies is you just do not make good decisions that way. You do not deliver high service levels. You want a diversity of ideas and perspectives. I think a third of our partners are not Caucasian. We have 3 partners who are in the US who are fluent in Chinese. We've got a team in Shanghai led by Tina Zhu. And so diversity is highly valued at Kleiner and in the companies we work on and in the boards of those companies. What are the winning traits for entrepreneurs? Chihuahua, what do you see in great entrepreneurs?
Great entrepreneurs have a huge idea and they can motivate a large group of people to go pursue that with them. That's fundamentally the most important thing that they bring. They also bring great judgment because many of them oftentimes are young, so they have judgment above and beyond their experience, and that's something that is not only learned but is oftentimes intuitive.
Trey, would you add that?
I would say great entrepreneurs are oftentimes great leaders. They're ones who can really inspire others to jump on their mission. Because when you're dealing in the early stages of these startup companies, it's a lot more than just the amount of dollars you're making from a salary that's motivating you to do this. Because you're probably not making a whole lot in the early days, and so you have to really have that vision and be able to inspire others to follow.
Mark Zynga, who's the CEO of Mark Pincus, who's CEO of Zynga, gave a talk that I think you can find online at the startup school. And I was really struck by it because he said to a bunch of overwhelmingly white male geeks, listen, let me tell you what the gig is. The venture capitalists, they'll back you, and then as soon as they do, they want to replace you. They want to get serious professional management in there. Before you know it, you've lost control of your company. You were negotiating for the wrong things. You negotiated for valuation. You should have gone for control. But he said more than anything else, you should try to figure out if you can be and become a CEO. He said, you ought to try to run that business, and you ought to be honest with yourself to figure out what it's going to take for you to develop those skills. And I'd say the best entrepreneurs, the ones that really go the distance with their companies, are always learning. They don't know what they don't know, so they attempt to do the impossible. They often do. But if you look at Jeff Bezos of Amazon.com, or you look at Larry and Sergey, a unique thing they did at Google, bringing in Eric Schmidt, these leaders, these entrepreneurs, really try to go the distance. Winning traits in entrepreneurs. We spent a little too much time on it. Kleiner's culture, how do we make decisions? It's a pretty collaborative culture. There's a lot borrowed from Intel in the culture. You want an environment where everybody can put their ideas on the table so that the best idea gets there and has a chance to win. We'll disagree, but after we make a decision, we'll commit. Any individual partner can veto an investment. Trey can veto an investment. I can. Chiwa can. That doesn't happen very often because we build consensus along the way for investment decisions. What else would you say about the culture?
I would add that I think we also work in teams a lot more than other venture firms, just having insight into how some other firms work, where it very much is a lone wolf who goes out, finds his own investment and works on it himself. We oftentimes have a couple of partners. The other person can call the other partners. Oftentimes you tend to go native on a company, and it's good to have that balance of vision on what's actually going on. And so I would say that's something that really differentiates KP.
Chiwa, you've been in another venture firm. What would you?
Yeah, I think the unique model that KP brings to the venture capital firm is that multiple partners are involved in every single venture. So as opposed to being single-threaded and getting one point of view, you're going to get multiple point of views, and each of those are going to come through different sets of experiences, which should help the entrepreneur make better decisions.
There's a topic here about investing in social entrepreneurs. I think it's a really important thing to do. You can back social entrepreneurs three ways. You can back them with money, if you have the money with which to do that. You can back them with time, and you can also back them with reputation, connections, or networking. And every one of the Kleiner partners spends some amount of their time giving back, some in very public ways, others in private ways. It's one of our strongly held values. We could talk a whole lot more about that. We could have a whole session on social entrepreneurs. There's a graduate of this school, Kim Smith, who wrote a GSB 380 plan and founded something called the New Schools Venture Fund, which because of her work today has started not 45 schools, but 25 networks of charter public schools that are allowing 100,000 kids now in total to, in really underserved, poor areas to get far better educations. As for venture capital in emerging markets, I don't know very much about that. We backed a team, have built a team in China. They make their own investment decisions. We collaborate with them on those, but business in China is very different than the rest of the world. We do invest in India. We do invest in Europe, but we do it out of Menlo Park. So it's very select when we'll make an investment outside this area. The predominant trends in venture capital is that the industry is shrinking, and it needs to because the returns have been lousy since 2000. If you take the industry overall, it's a loser. If you put money in the venture capital industry, you'll lose your money. So we've had too many venture capitalists chasing too few really good ideas, funding incrementally undifferentiated, socially networked, anonymous chat sites so that you can get laid as you're walking down University Avenue. I don't know what more to say about it than that. That's certainly not what our priority is at Kleiner. We'd rather help entrepreneurs build really successful, significant companies that are going to make a difference. And I've probably gotten in enough trouble on that. Android, Chihuahua.
Yeah, so Android is the second dominant platform. We're watching it very closely. By the end of this year, there will probably be between 10 and 20 million Android devices out there. For those of you that don't know, Android is an open-sourced operating system focused on mobile devices that Google's created, while iPhone is a closed-sourced operating system that they control end-to-end. The issue with Android that we're all going to have to watch very closely if you guys are thinking of developing on Android today is fragmentation of the ecosystem. When you have open source and you give it to a bunch of hardware OEMs, each of them do different things with it. They've got different screen sizes, different keyboard layouts. Some have keyboards, some don't. Some go horizontal, some go vertical. Some leave GPS turned on as default, some don't. So as an application developer, what killed the mobile ecosystem over the last 10 years in applications was the expense associated with porting to hundreds, maybe thousands of different devices. For Android to be successful, and we hope it is, as part of this trend in open mobile, it has to avoid that fate.
I think I probably didn't do justice to trends in venture capital. I kind of got off with the industry is a lot tougher. It takes more money to start ventures now than it did before. It takes more time to get them to be developed. Therefore, I think it's fair to assume that the returns are going to be lower for the industry. But what offsets that are the outliers. You know, most of the money in venture capital has been made by firms in the top decile, the top 10%, and the industry, even those, have to perform better than they have in the past. There is a trend towards green in the industry. That's the most rapidly growing sector. I think it's now number 2 or number 3. To your question about the life sciences, that remains an incredibly important and vibrant part of what Kleiner's doing. I don't really know enough about it to give you a very good perspective on it, but we have a half dozen partners who are the best. They do that day in and day out. Kleiner is not a quantity shop. We're not into the volume of investments or making money on the fees from the investments. We'd rather be quality and back a smaller number of ventures, be more involved in trying to help those. There's another important trend in venture capital, which is the rise of angel funds, and that's particularly been encouraged by virtue of the fact that it takes less money now to start an internet company by a factor of 5 or so than it did 10 years ago. We've covered Android. The advice to startup companies, if you Google John Doerr's startup manual, there's a nice interview that was done in Fast Company with me on exactly that point. E-readers, I think we've just scratched the surface of what's possible. I'm on the board of Amazon and want to note that Amazon has said publicly when a book is available on the Kindle or available in the Amazon bookstore, and they are the world's largest bookseller, 35% of the book sales are through the Kindle. And it's been out for a little over a year. That's an astonishing shift. So I think physical books are not going away, but the e-readers, I believe, are going to be here to stay, even in a world where we may see tablets from Apple and others. This dedicated, purpose-built device, I think will stick around. I'm going to skip pay for content. We just don't have time. Silicon Valley for digital startups. I believe it is the place still to do a digital startup. Of course, not because of the latitude or the longitude, but because of the quality of the people that are around here. And you're in an incredibly privileged place here at the business school. One more piece of advice. Don't take all your courses in the business school. Figure out a way to get into those other schools at this great university. Hang around, I don't know if they're still in Margaret Jacks Hall, hang around the engineering school, hang around the innovations in energy and in the life sciences, because having taken one more or less, whatever your course is, accounting, marketing, whatever it is not so important, I think, as reaching out and connecting with innovation that's going on. When I did a business school degree at Harvard, I took all my independent study courses at MIT, one in semiconductor physics, one in speech understanding. One was an independent study, so you're in a very privileged place right here, and you should take advantage of it. Tactical strategy for work-life balance. I'm going to give you mine and then have Trey and Chihuahua give you theirs. What I found the most important thing is for somebody who wants to raise a family, and you may be a ways away from that probably, is how many times you get home for dinner with your kids, and then that you be there while you're there for dinner. So I said, fine, I'm going to set a goal. It came from Intel. If you don't measure it, it doesn't matter. 20 nights a month, I'm going to be home by 6:30 to have dinner with my 2 daughters and my wife. And I'm not disciplined enough to do that, so Angela helps me do it, but we measure it. And I've been achieving that ever since I put it in as a goal. The one other thing, so that you're really there, is I have everybody in our family check our iPhones and stay off the web for an hour before dinner and an hour after. We declare that to be a family-friendly, internet-free time zone, that period of time. Trey?
So first of all, I'd say that there is no such thing as work-life balance. It always feels a little crazy and hectic. And so the idea of you're going to have serenity in balancing the two is just non-existent. I think the thing that I've learned is it does require extreme prioritization and focus on what matters to you. And so to that extent, it's good to write it down and focus on, I'm going to be home at these times, and I'm going to do my work at these times, and I'm going to go exercise here, and I'm going to be really anal and rigorous around planning this. Otherwise, everything else is going to overtake my life and not let me do those things. When I get home, and I try and be home, 3 of the 5 work nights a week, which doesn't always happen, but I try to, I do not turn on my computer or my iPhone until my kids are in bed. It's a rule. I don't get a lot of sleep during the week, because then after I put them in bed, I'm up till the wee hours of the night getting my work done. But it's one of the trade-offs I make, and I feel with that balance, I get really good quality time with my kids every night, and I get my work done. We work really hard, and it all seems to work out.
Yeah, I think one of the critical things is to over-communicate and set very, very clear goals. So my wife and I were married when we came to business school, and during that 2-year period, I believe in my class, the class of '06, there was 8 couples, married couples, who got divorced. And for us, that was quite a shock to learn that and to see that. And what we learned through that is to really communicate very clearly and aggressively about how we were doing with one another. We have a red light, yellow light, green light methodology where, yeah, it's really simple. We can just check in with each other, and when she says things are yellow, I know that I have to slow down. And then the other very clear goal is, if you set things that you need to do every day, make sure that you're there and make sure that your partners know you need to do it. So I have a 10-month-old at home, and one of the things that I do with her every day is I get home in time to give her bath, or feed her dinner, give her bath, and put her to bed. And I've managed to do that almost every single day in the last 10 months because I set clear goals. I communicated that to my partners. They understood that was a priority, but they also understood I had other responsibilities that I would take care of on behalf of the firm.
I'm very proud of the culture at Kleiner, and so I'd like to share with you what our values are, because we screen for these. Everybody at Kleiner really, I think, likes being there and respects the values of each other. And our first priority is?
Family first.
Right. And so if anybody's got to do anything to take care of their kid or their dying parent, or my mom's got brain cancer in Taiwan, I need to be out of the office for half the time to take care of her. We just do that. Nothing matters more than family. And not everybody's married, not everybody has kids, but you get the idea. It can be your extended family. The second priority is?
Partners. Our partners.
Right. So more important than me trying to help Jeff Bezos is me working with Trey or with Chiwa and vice versa, because ideas are easy, execution's everything, teams win. And so we're very much a team. That spectacular Lone Ranger who can do it all on their own, there's really not room for them in our partnership. Our third priority is?
Portfolio.
Portfolio. These are the CEOs. If you're not in the venture capital business, these are the clients to whom you've already made commitments. We've got to serve them every day. That's more important than the next new Facebook. And so we prioritize that. The next priority is?
New ventures.
New ventures, right. Exactly.
Trey's too busy with the first 3. I got there more recently.
This is the most seductive thing, the new. We're innovation junkies. We like spending a lot of time with that. You want to prioritize it, but it's clearly less important than your family. And then the 5th priority is some form of public or community service. Again, in the large or in the small, in a private way, because we've been given so much. It would be terrible if we don't give back. Sometimes I wedge into this list, and notably not on it, is friends. And if you're as busy as you are and we are, and you want to have friends, you better prioritize it. You better invest time in it. And I think on that, we're at our time limit, 5 minutes over, and I'd like to thank all of you. Remember, before that, if you send us your 3 favorite books, I'll send you the list back that we had, and we'd love to talk with you about the future. Thank you very much.